The smartest character in the DCAU. This is something I've seen debated over and over, and something that is even brought up by Batman in the DCAU. And while you could definitely say characters like Lex Luthor, Batman, or Mr. Terrific, one character that I almost never see brought up in this conversation is the character of the Joker. And honestly, that is an absolute shame because to me, the Joker is definitely, without a doubt, one of the smartest people in the entire DCAU. And that is why today we're talking the Joker is one of the smartest in the DCAU. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, the Joker in the DCAU. You see, the first example that really shows us that the Joker is definitely one of the smartest people in the entire DCAU is without a doubt in the crossover with Superman. In this crossover, we do see that he makes a deal with Lex Luthor in order to kill Superman. And at first, Lex does not believe him. He says that the Joker struggles with Batman, so how could he possibly be able to take on the Man of Steel? And this is where Joker points out that he's been reading up on Superman. He knows his weakness. Not only does he know his weakness, but he has obtained some kryptonite. And I know this may seem like not that big of a deal because it is a misconception that kryptonite is so very easily accessible in a lot of different universes. And while sometimes that is the case, in the DCAU, it really isn't. Batman has kryptonite. Lex Luthor has kryptonite. However, outside of those two characters, realistically, almost no one else has had kryptonite in the DCAU. And I know characters like Metallo, or even the former professional boxer that did fight against Superman did utilize kryptonite. However, they were hired by Lex, so the only reason they got kryptonite was because of Lex Luthor. And he has incredible resources, and that is why he was able to obtain kryptonite. But if we look at the Joker, he doesn't have those resources. And we also know kryptonite wasn't something that the Daily Planet put into their articles. This was actually something specific that Superman said to Lois Lane and asked her not to print anything about the kryptonite. And she obliged. She did not put anything about the kryptonite. So when he says he's been reading up on Lex's Flyboy, he is saying he has been doing thorough research. And that thorough research has led him not only to what exactly is Superman's weakness, but where to find it. And he finds it in this really old pawn shop inside of Gotham City. So that means not only was he able to identify what the weakness was, he was able to find where the kryptonite was, and it's not like it was advertised as this was kryptonite, so he would have had to do thorough research on the inventory of this pawn shop. He would have had to compare the chemical makeup of this statue to what Superman's weakness is known to be made of, similar to what Batman did when he first discovered the little shards of the statue that was left behind. I gave a lot of praise for Batman doing this, however, it also takes a lot of brilliance on the part of the Joker to not only identify where this weakness could be found, but also just to identify what the weakness was itself. And not only that, his plan actually did work in order to take down Superman. He lures Superman in by kidnapping Lois Lane because it is pretty obvious that Superman and Lois Lane have some sort of connection in the DCAU. And even though Superman does show up prepared, he doesn't deal with the Joker on a regular basis, so he doesn't know to expect the unexpected, something that Batman actually pointed out to him before this altercation. So because of that, even though Superman was prepared, he was inevitably taken down by the Joker. And the Joker was standing over Superman, electrocuting him over and over again as Superman was laying there on the ground dying, unable to do anything against the Joker because the kryptonite was there and because he had just been sprayed by acid, which 100% affected him because he was already in the presence of the kryptonite. So the fact that he was able to this easily bring the Man of Steel down to his knees definitely shows you how absolutely brilliant this iteration of the Joker is. However, that is just the beginning of it because he would routinely take down different members of the Justice League. In his first ever appearance in the Justice League, not only does he take out Wonder Woman, which I will give you, it was kind of just convenient as she literally caught a doll and it exploded. However, him taking down the Flash, although people might not like it, it actually is pretty brilliant because he simply throws marbles on the ground that are grenades and the Flash tries to weave through them so he doesn't slip on them, but he isn't anticipating that they aren't just ordinary marbles. They are, in fact, grenades. And this is the Joker seeing his past experience fighting people other than Batman. You see, Joker tried to use these marbles before on Superman, and Superman was about to fall for it, only to be stopped by Batman when Batman told him these weren't ordinary marbles, and then they did start exploding. However, Joker definitely took a mental note of this and then decided to use these against someone else that wasn't Batman, and lo and behold, it did work. And while this isn't some crazy feat, it is still pretty remarkable to take down 2 different members of the Justice League, and 3 if you count the other time when he did take down Superman. And not only that, when he is introduced in this 2-part episode, Lex wants him to leave. Lex says he doesn't need his help. However, very quickly, the Joker shows why they all need the Joker's help. And he does this by simply reaching onto Lex's collar and grabbing a tracer that Batman placed on it, showing that he knows the Batman the best. The altercation with Lex earlier was only so that the League could gather more information, and Batman wouldn't let them all just escape. Even if all of them got away, they wouldn't get away for good. And the Joker knows the Batman well enough by this point to know if they were able to escape, it was for a reason. And Batman had a contingency for this. And lo and behold, Batman does show up. However, thanks to the Joker, when he does show up, the Joker knocks him out because they were expecting him. And then once he wakes up, the Joker suggests to Lex that they should kill Batman. However, Lex, being his arrogant self, decides not to kill Batman. Instead, he wants to use Batman, he wants to hold him hostage, and he assures everyone that Batman can't escape. Martian Manhunter is unable to locate Batman because of this field that Lex created. Because of how much of a genius Lex is, they can't possibly fail. However, they do end up failing. Again, as I mentioned in my Lex is stupid video, I'll put it up right here, Batman was able to systematically manipulate multiple members of the Injustice Gang. And by doing this, he put so many wedges in that team, and it led to them turning on each other, and inevitably Ultra Humanite turning on Lex in order to defeat him. And Lex lost in the end because of that. And on top of that, Ultra Humanite was the one who ultimately called the Watchtower, warning them about the bomb. So if hypothetically Lex had listened to the Joker in this moment, after the Joker already showed how much he knows Batman and how advantageous it is to have the Joker on his side, there would have been no one to warn the Justice League, which means the Watchtower would have exploded. And yes, Superman would have survived. But honestly, I don't believe a single other person would have survived. You could argue Green Lantern would have survived. However, in this universe, he is definitely scaled down, especially with how durable his force fields are. We see him later unable to shield himself from a smaller explosion. So if hypothetically the entire Watchtower exploded, he probably would die. The Flash would die. Hawkgirl would die. Wonder Woman probably would die, and Martian Manhunter very likely would die. So again, Superman would probably be the only person who survives, and even if you want to argue that Martian Manhunter and maybe Wonder Woman survive as well, that is still only 3 people out of the 7 Justice League members still left alive. So if hypothetically then those 3 were to attack them, not only would Lex have the upper hand, just from a sheer number standpoint, Lex was literally beating Superman. He was about to defeat Superman when Ultra Humanite betrayed him. However, in this hypothetical scenario, Batman wouldn't have been there to bribe Ultra Humanite. So Ultra Humanite would still be on the side of Lex. So they would take down Superman. And then the rest of the Injustice League would definitely be able to handle Wonder Woman and Martian Manhunter, as they were going toe-to-toe with them before when they had more backup. However, in this scenario, they would be much more outnumbered and they would definitely be overwhelmed. However, this actually isn't the only time the Joker almost defeated the Justice League, or his plans would have been involved in defeating the Justice League. You see, in his other appearance in the Justice League animated series, he introduces us to the Royal Flush Gang, and although he doesn't do anything to create them or really manipulate them, he absolutely manipulates the strongest one in the Royal Flush Gang, and that is Ace. And not only does he do that, he tricks everyone into watching this broadcast as he has placed bombs throughout the city, and everyone is watching at home as the Justice Justice League tries to disarm all these bombs. However, this turns out to be a ruse and was just a ploy in order to get as many people possible watching this broadcast so that he could have them look into Ace's eyes so they could all become mad. And it works. Not only does it work and affect a vast majority of the population watching at home, it also affects the Justice League. Everyone except Batman was caught in this, and they were totally helpless as a result. And the only thing that led to the Joker losing in this moment was Harley Quinn's jealousy because of how the Joker was with Ace. And Batman smartly pointed that out, knowing how jealous Harley Quinn would be in this moment. But it still just goes to show you how absolutely brilliant the Joker's scheme was. Because not just once, but 2 different times, he would have either directly been responsible for taking out the entire Justice League, or he would have played a major role in that. And his planning would have been a major factor in the success of that. However, since we're talking about his manipulation, we cannot forget, although this is very, very messed up, him manipulating a distinguished psychiatrist in Harleen Quinzel into becoming Harley Quinn is absolutely brilliant. Again, I'm not saying it is anything to be praised. However, it is something to note that it does take a certain level of intellect for him to be able to manipulate her to this degree. She breaks out of his control multiple times, and even running off with Poison Ivy when they are doing their own thing, she is shown to still be thinking about him. Even when they successfully pull off different capers, she wants to share in everything she stole with the Joker. So much so that one time she even calls him, and because of this, he is able to locate her. And then in the episode Mad Love, even after getting thrown out, instead of totally abandoning the Joker, she instead decides to kidnap and hold hostage Batman in order to prove her love to the Joker. And although she does break free of his control after she is thrown out of a window by the Joker, it takes one measly note from the Joker in order to get her from being completely done with him to being right back on board with him, which is absolutely insane. And again, I am not saying this is something to be praised or admired. It is absolutely cruel. However, it definitely shows how absolutely intelligent this version of the Joker is. He is able to manipulate so many different people around him, and a lot of times he very nearly wins in the end as a result of it. Speaking of his manipulations and scheming with Harley, we cannot forget what is perhaps his most brilliant feat in the DCAU, and that is, without a doubt, everything that happened with Tim Drake. You see, not only was he able to implant his DNA on a microchip, which is something that even the likes of Brainiac took multiple years to be able to do. And yes, he was able to do it to a very high degree. His was much more imperfect. And yes, I know his wasn't technically a microchip, but it was still implanting his DNA onto Lex Luthor. However, to me, the way the Joker did it actually was way more efficient and actually turned out a lot better. There weren't any very negative effects of this. When we see Lex first transform after it's revealed that he has been merged with Brainiac, it does show he's in a lot of pain, and it does show that Brainiac doesn't have full control. However, with the Joker, he does have full control, which means the Joker was able to pull something off that surpassed what even Brainiac could do, which is absolutely insane. And not only was he able to do this, he decided to do it on the sidekick of his greatest enemy. And although Joker's hubris did lead to him ultimately dying, he definitely knew he wouldn't be dead forever. He knew about the microchip he had put on Tim, so he knew his legacy would live on. However, to him, he ultimately won because his legacy would be continued by destroying Batman's legacy. Because if Tim Drake did indeed become the Joker as he did, it would lead to Batman's legacy being truly tarnished, as someone Batman trained inevitably turned into the Clown Prince of Crime, Batman's ultimate enemy. And the Joker almost succeeded and pulled this off. And he even learned from his mistakes and decided to go right to Wayne Manor after revealing the Joker had returned, not giving Bruce any time to recuperate or any time to prepare for anything, and took him out of the equation. The only reason he was taken down is because he did not know anything about Terry McGinnis. He decided to underestimate Terry, and a big reason why he underestimated Terry, he thought he was nothing but a thug. He thought he was a punk. He thought he was a nobody. But what he didn't know is that he was indeed Batman. He was Bruce's son, in the words of Amanda Waller. That's actually why I do kind of like the addition of what Epilogue gave us, because I like to think that this is one of the reasons Terry was able to ultimately defeat the Joker. And it gives deeper meaning to the Joker underestimating Terry McGinnis because he doesn't truly know about his lineage, which would be a cool callback to how the Joker would underestimate Batman in the beginning before he learned that Batman is no mere mortal. And that would be something that he would tell everyone going forward. So him having to learn this about Terry McGinnis in the end is actually a really cool full circle moment. But all that being said, those are all the reasons why I truly believe the Joker is definitely one of the smartest people in the DCAU. But I'm interested to hear from you guys. Do you agree that the Joker is at the very least top 10 in the DCAU and maybe even top 5 as far as smartest people? Let me know in the comments below. While you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.